service, so they probably want to put as much things or attention to that as possible, and kind of like, and this and this, you know, for example, the new news subject could be even relation to it, sort of in a particular way, is that Arrow, good old Stephen Amell's you know, Arrow, Green Arrow, or like you would say basically a basically Batman for the TV show is it's ending after what, 8 seasons. So it didn't break Smallville's run of 10 seasons, but 8 is still pretty damn good for a TV show, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that I've been watching this show for 8 years.
Oh god, I remember it was like basically the first year of uni, I think.
Yeah, I think for me as well. And yeah, they've kind of mentioned that yes, Arrow is finishing with season 8, and season 8 is going to be 10 episodes, which kind of highlights to me that and it's a big sign. I don't know if you kind of put these 2 and 2 together with the theory that I mentioned back during our Crisis of Infinite Earths talk, that Arrow is probably going to die in the crossover event.
Well, like the whole point was that in that episode, it was like there was a sacrifice that needed to be made, things like that. So like, and then like the villain disappears, kind of thing, and it's like he shrugs it off. It's kind of very suspect. Where I'm like, okay, like you didn't really solve it properly, and I think it does lead to that, and kind of him kind of ending, you know, and like sacrificing himself for everyone else.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what it signaled to me immediately. The moment that I found out that they weren't doing a full season of Arrow seems to suggest that this is the case. Like maybe they'll have a big celebration and a big kind of you know, like last hurrah for Stephen Amell as the Arrow. And it might be that, yeah, like we're going to see the characters kind of wrap up their stories. And to be fair, like in the current season of Arrow, they are kind of leading off to a little bit into the future. Originally, I kind of thought that this might be like an alternate future, but it seems to be that, yeah, if the show's kind of finishing next year, they can kind of do all these wacky stuff that's happening in the future and close off some stories. But yeah, it means that, Stephen Amell is probably either passing the torch off to someone else, or that it's actually officially finishing. Now, I thought that maybe that might mean that they're doing like a bit of a joke where it's like, Arrow dies and it goes off the air for like a year or so, but then he comes back in like the next crossover event where they go to save Stephen Amell and the Arrow and all these people. That's just me holding on to hope, though. I don't think that's actually the case, but my hope is that they might do something like that, because that's kind of, you know, doing the whole Death of Superman arc, where it's like, you know, people thought Superman died, and then, you know, a couple of months later, he came back, and he came back with a mullet and a cool black suit. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think, like, you know, obviously they're doing an homage to the Crisis of Infinite Earth storyline. And yeah, like, you know, again, Stephen Amell has been playing the character for 8 years. He might be getting bored of it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of saddened just because of, like, you know, there was a lot of potential in this show. And to be fair, I think the highest highs, in the CW TV show has been on Arrow, and the lowest lows has also been on Arrow. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of hit and miss for me. I feel like Arrow probably had like one whole bad season, but I feel like every one of these shows had like a bad season. The thing that comes to mind is like you know, Flash season from like last year, and it's like you know, like, she's gonna die. Arrow's sister's gonna die. We need to figure.
That's actually the season from before. That season.
Okay. Well, I did not like that season at all.
I actually wasn't a big fan. I ended up not being a big fan of the Thinker. I think that's his name. Last season.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of that season kind of fell apart towards the end. The beginning of that season is really good. And I think the same with the Iris West story. I think there's the like saving Iris West. There's aspects of it that are interesting, but then like everything that kind of culminated in the big villain in the end was kind of disappointing. they are adapting a few more other stuff in Arrow as well, such as Godspeed, which is actually from the Rebirth storyline, who's really cool. But anyways, I'll leave that for a later review of The Flash. But yeah, I think all the shows do have their bad seasons here and there. I think personally Supergirl's probably got the worst. Like, if we're going to do like how many seasons are good versus how many seasons are bad, I think technically Supergirl falls into that as the worst, and then maybe Legends of Tomorrow, and then it's like maybe maybe Arrow Flash has the same, but then again Flash has only been like on 5 seasons rather than 8, 7, right? So, it's kind of cheating if they have like 1 or 2 bad seasons. Like, I don't know. Arrow in the end seems to be the one that does the best. Am I missing any other show? From the Flash?
Because like, stuff like Black Lightning, but it's kind of like semi-separate and things like that. Yeah.
No, I don't think technically Black Lightning's canon, so I don't necessarily count that. Unless they're in the final episodes, like, it doesn't count. But the big thing that this kind of shows is the crossover event is going to have a big, because I think the death of Oliver is probably going to have in the future shows that get released. And it also kind of gives, like, hopefully if they kill him, that also kind of necessarily allows them to bring him back in some capacity. Like, maybe he might be there in like a flashback, or maybe if another character's going to die, they're going to have him come back as like a guest. There's always that potential, and I feel like Stephen Amell is definitely a guy who like kind of plays ball. He's a guy who he is like, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and he's always kind of been like a really friendly guy, like on social media from what I've seen. The other thing that this kind of opens, in terms of kind of consequences, quote unquote, for the CW universe, is that it leaves a slot open for a future CW TV show, which is Batwoman.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's probably, I think, that's maybe a way where they're just like, we have too many shows. We'll cull the one that's closest to Batman, and then actually
put Batman,
put like the semi-Bat family thing in there.
Yeah, because that's what I thought as well. I'm like, okay, this might mean that maybe the first half of, they obviously split the season up over the year for the CW TV shows, where they have like a bit of a break, and maybe the second half of where Arrow would premiere, they're actually going to have a small opening season for Batwoman just to see how it goes, and then based on,
like, it would fill up this time slot that Arrow would have at the moment. Yeah,
exactly, and also they will have like a similar. It's a very similar style of show, right? Some TV shows, when they have a similar setting, some producers and stuff, they don't want to make the TV show or networks don't want to air those kind of shows. Like, you can look at something like Constantine, right? Constantine is a CW TV show.
It's apparently they're trying to reboot with Matt Ryan.
Well, they probably should.
Yeah.
Well, they probably should, but the thing is, they kind of didn't want to make the show just because it would eat into other shows such as Supernatural, which is a very, very similar show to Constantine. It would literally be the very same, like the exact same show, in terms of some of the things that they deal with. A lot of the demons, a lot of the plot lines borrow heavily from like the Constantine Hellblazer universe. But yeah, and I think it's the same thing with Batwoman and Arrow. It's going to be vigilantes. They don't have superpowers, but they kick ass and they wear tight lycra leather suits, right? Instead, it's going to be Batman or Batwoman in this case. And yeah, they've mentioned that they've casted. I think that it's Luke. I think his name is. He's the son of the inventor. He works for Wayne Enterprise. And this character, he's going to be playing, I think, Batwing in the TV, in the comics at least. And I think he'll probably be reprising that role eventually in the Batwoman TV show. So I'm aware of that character coming back. And like, this is the thing. Again, they'll have to pick side characters to put on these CW TV shows because for some reason well, yeah, because it's like you're not gonna have Barbara Gordon. I don't think.
I know maybe you could. I feel like I feel like she isn't as big of a character as mainstream people know. And
I disagree because the thing is, okay, for example, they're gonna have Luke Fox, who is the son of Lucius Fox. So Lucius Fox is kind of like the big inventor tech guy who helps Batman make all these cool little gadgets, right? They're having his son, who was in the comics as well, who plays, I think his name is Batwing. And his suit is kind of like, in the comics they kind of explained, it ends up being kind of the proto suit for Batman Beyond. If you can kind of imagine, that's what his suit kind of looks like. And so his character will probably play like the, he'll probably be like the head of R&D, and he'll do all the tech stuff like, ooh, hey, look at this cool new grappling X-ray gun that you can use, Batwoman, right? Like, it's going to be, he'll play that role, but then eventually they'll have him in like season 2, don an actual suit and have him actually fight. Yeah, that's what I would imagine his character would be. I do know they have some other characters that have been introduced, but I'm not as familiar with them. Like, there's Sophie Moore. I'm not really too sure who Sophie Moore is. They say that she's like a high-level private security agent. Maybe she might be like some kind of love interest for Kate Kane's character, who is an open lesbian in the actual comics. Yeah, like, I'd be interested to see Renee Montoya come back in the kind of limelight. She was shown in like Batman the Animated Series as a member of the Gotham City Police Department. Her and I think it was the other character who is currently in Gotham at the moment. Commissioner Gordon's like right hand man. Like, they're usually Harvey Bullock. Renee and Harvey are usually the two kind of cops who work together, and you have Commissioner Gordon kind of like overseeing, what they're doing. But they're usually like the two straight and narrow cop characters. I think her character will be coming in the new Batwoman character TV show, but I'm not too sure if like they have confirmed it. Her character later becomes a superhero. But it's not a really big one. I don't know if you remember. It's like the one that has like the mask, called The Question.
Yeah, I remember. Like, I think I saw a comic or two about The Question, and it is a cool character. But like, it'd be weird to see it kind of in the mainstream. But like, I couldn't wait for that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, she becomes the second iteration of The Question, because essentially, because in Batman the Animated Series and Justice League the Animated Series, The Question was like this person who always had like, ooh, what are these conspiracy theories? Always asking questions about stuff. Very, very much like a Rorschach derivative, right? Like, Rorschach, I'm pretty sure one inspired the other. I forget which one though. But eventually, like in one of the comics, The Question, dies, and Renee Montoya takes on the mantle of The Question. So again, that kind of opens him up to having a bunch of new characters with superhero personas and having interesting stuff. But it does also explain why they're kind of wrapping up Gotham this season, so they can maybe justify having Harvey Bullock come in, and maybe having Commissioner Gordon have like the police liaison. But I think if they're going to have a liaison, they're probably going to have Renee Montoya. But yeah, ultimately, I think that's what the end of Arrow kind of leads, like, is seeming like. It's going to be leading into ushering in like a new age of the CW, much like what's happening in the CW universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're kind of ending their movie run.
Well, yeah, it's been like pretty long, like. Like nearly 10 plus years for like nearly all these properties. So it's at that point where it's like ushering a new thing, because at some point it kind of gets semi-stale. So like, I understand it. I even heard the stories about like Legends of Tomorrow. Like, it's like next season could be the last one as well. So who knows what they're doing with it? But you know.
Legends of Tomorrow is very much like, okay, we have a bunch of actors that don't fit in the current TV show and what it's doing. Let's smash them together and see if we can come up with something. Let's smash our toys together and come up with a cool storyline to justify why the Flash is working with, I don't know, White Canary from Arrow, who died like several seasons ago. It's that thing. And I mean, the fact that Legends of Tomorrow wasn't in the latest crossover event kind of shows that, like maybe they're kind of distancing themselves and having a more tight-knit show universe. Because again, like, if you think about it, the big three is always, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. They kind of can't do that in this universe, and they kind of had their kind of, Trinity was Arrow, Flash, and Supergirl. With the death of Arrow, they can introduce Batwoman. I just hope that they kind of don't do the whole searching for Bruce Wayne storyline for too long and focus a lot more on Batman and Batman villains. Like, eventually, like, he'll come on as, like, some kind of older role, but he doesn't necessarily don the bat suit, if that makes sense. Like, maybe it's like an old man Batman storyline.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But, like,
a Batman Beyond role.
It's not only that, but it's like, they could probably do a Batman Beyond, but, like, since they do have their streaming service, they probably want to save, if anything, the big guns, for, like, probably that. But I don't know. I feel like it's kind of the same thing with, like, what Marvel's doing also with the TV as well on their side, where, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is also ending as well, and, but
nobody cares about
all their Netflix stuff, so, like, I'm assuming at some point they will reboot it, but it's, like, all been licensing issues, probably, so.
Yeah, but nobody cares about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah,
even me, as somebody who's watching it, I don't care that much.
I watch, like, a season and a half, I'm like, I'm alright, I'm good.
Yeah, well, again, like, that show kind of ran its course. I think a lot of the time they want to kind of push shows into some unspeakable level of seasons. And I think that's kind of a little bit what's been happening with Arrow as well. I think part of it was the mistake after season 2, where they ended up getting rid of Red Arrow, Arsenal, and not having him play the family role and playing the Robin role to Arrow's Batman, right? I feel like that's where the show kind of fell apart, and they were trying every subsequent season to kind of come up with like a new team and a new set of ideas. Like Diggle, great introduction of a character that works well with the team. Same thing with Felicity, but again, they kind of overdid her role. And it just became something infectious throughout the entire show in terms of the direction that it can go from, a CW romantic plot perspective. Every other iteration of like a team for Arrow never really worked after season 2, in my opinion. Even with the introduction of a lot of characters that are classic characters such as, Mr. Terrific, I really like Mr. Terrific, and I'm currently reading him in the comics at the moment in The Terrifics, which is a parody of the Fantastic Four. But yeah, like a lot of these things kind of went beyond the scope of maybe what they were trying to do, and therefore it suffered as a result. Doesn't mean it doesn't lead to interesting things. Like I can't talk any more about like how much I love the interaction between Oliver Queen and Deathstroke. It's like one of the best kind of comic rivalries on TV that I've seen in a very long time. Like, and it's one that I didn't even like really think about before. I didn't even know Green Arrow had any kind of interaction with Deathstroke. I don't actually know. I never really looked into it. But like when it comes to like a classic, fight between like, Daredevil and Wilson Fisk, or, the Purple Man and, Jessica Jones, like, this has got to be one of the greatest rivalries, which was season 1, 2, and, the continuation in, I think, season 5 or 6, where, Deathstroke comes back and they actually team up and have shenanigans together.
That was definitely a highlight of that season.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you can't really have that with a show that but that's what I'm saying. The show kind of has a lot of highlights, but then at the same time they'll have their kind of basic episodes that kind of like push the plot a little bit, but then it's like 80% drama or whatever. Yeah, it's one of those things that I naturally will come to an end. But like you said, it might be something that DC is doing where they're gonna try and end some of these TV shows and move them towards like a more streaming platform on their WB network. Maybe they might they're seeing the writing on the wall. They're seeing, well, okay, Supergirl is getting X amount. Again, Supergirl was supposed to be on NBC before they were like, well, it's probably not getting enough eyeballs on NBC. Let's just put it on CW anyways. And it'll make a lot of the liaising easier too. And to be fair, I actually really like Melissa Benoist, I think, as Supergirl. She looks the part, she acts the part. But again, like the actual plot and some of the shows, they're doing the Superman and the Elite storyline. I don't know if you know too much about that, Don.
No idea.
Yeah, there was like a movie. There was a movie that came out a couple of years back. That's my familiarity with it, but it's essentially like, a bunch of superpowered individuals come in and, start doing the classic, well, we're gonna execute these villains instead of keeping them alive and letting them wreak havoc. But ultimately it comes down to, a clash of ideas where Superman, he's a guy who doesn't kill. He always does what's good. Where versus these elite who see the, it's the means justifies the end, and that's the way that they see their life. And there's like a big battle that happens and, there's things like that. And they're currently doing that storyline, in Supergirl at the moment, which I don't think is bad. I think I think season 3 of Supergirl is probably the best season of Supergirl that's come out. And that's not even to say much, but I kind of like some of the things that are happening and a lot of the contrast between, I guess, modern day politics, but then cycling it all in the DC mythos, like putting in they haven't even touched back on the whole, Russian Supergirl storyline, yet at this stage, or the Red Sun Supergirl storyline as of yet. So that's still up in the air as a potential return. But yeah, with all these shows, they might be seeing okay, maybe they'll give these shows maybe another 3 seasons. Maybe they'll all try and fit in eight seasons of these shows. Maybe Batwoman might be the shortest one. And then transition over more original content on their streaming platform. Because again, you look at Titans. Titans is a great TV show that does an excellent job at introducing new characters with a big budget. Even if it felt kind of rushed at the beginning, towards the midpoint and towards the end, it kind of really gets its stride. And maybe some people would prefer consuming content like that rather than a serial episodic content, a classic 22 episode season.
Yeah, I feel like, if it's more constrained of a season, they got a little more of a budget and they can have a lot more cooler set pieces. And, I think that's probably the way to go for a lot of that stuff. But, overall, it's kind of like Stephen Amell's embraced the character for so long and, it's basically had his start and he's kind of he is very much the type of person to go to conventions and all the time, John Barrowman and things like that with him as well. And he is very much the type of that crowd where, even if he just retires at this point, he can do conventions all around the world and he would have a crowd kind of following him. So yeah, definitely Arrow has its up and down, but I have enjoyed the show and, it was very much the new generation of the new, superhero TV shows. 'Cause it was basically Smallville. And then, there was really much else. Not even Marvel had stuff. And then, Arrow came out. And then the resurgence kind of came along. So, we'll definitely be talking about it when it comes to the final season.